Okay, let's take a look at urinary incontinence, another one of the Gero syndromes. We're going to take a look at the prevalence, which some of the statistics will surprise you. Obviously, there are negative social, psychologic, physiologic, economic is ridiculous what things cost, and it is not a normal part of aging. I think that's the biggest issue. It is not a normal part of aging. We're going to look at collecting all the correct data related to their control and what we can put into an evidence-based plan of care and evidence-based interventions because we really want to promote continence for those that are at risk. A lot of key terms. And what's amazing when you get into urinary is you'll see there are so many different types of urinary incontinence that we'll be talking about. What we look at prevalence, what's amazing, it's about 10% of the population, up to 70% that live in long-term care. That's just an incredibly large number. And again, this is a medical condition. Women are seen twice as much as men. I mean, it's just our urethras are smaller. We've had babies. Just the aging process itself. But again, age is not the problem. It's our age with conditions we've had prior. So it is not a normal consequence of physiologic aging. Okay, but some changes, like I said, will cause urinary incontinence to occur in more older persons. So what does that mean? Well, if I have urgency, my risk for falling is much greater, which means I can break my skin. And with the different types of urinary incontinence, skin breakdown becomes a big issue. More at risk for urinary tract infections if we're wearing undergarments to catch urine leakage, and obviously disrupted sleep, waking up at night or nocturia. This again will increase that risk for falls and fractures. Psychologically, it can be depressing that you're for anybody, especially active out in the community, and your world revolves around going to the bathroom. Maybe you want to play golf, maybe you want to go for a car ride, and you'll have anxiety about going with, which really becomes loss of control and self-esteem. These are really big issues, and I think if, we're saying 70% of nursing home residents have some type of urinary incontinence. Nobody wants to be dependent to have to help them with their toileting. I mean, that's just such a private thing. Again, social isolation, like I said, they may avoid going on a trip or groups. And I think the hardest thing with this is that the cost for this is not covered by insurance. And Depends are expensive. Even the generic brands of Depends and pads really add up. The direct cost of urinary incontinence is up to $16 billion a year, and up to $5.2 billion of nursing home monies are spent on incontinence products. Just think of that alone. And this also I find amazing. 1 hour of labor goes into incontinence care for everybody that works. That's just incredible. And then add on falls, fractures, and pressure ulcers. So up to almost 8% of total nursing home costs. It's just crazy. But here's where we want to just take a moment and really look at the different types of incontinence, because we may intervene a little bit differently, but it's also when people ask, why is this happening to me? Again, transient can be, maybe they're have an infection and they're just so fatigued and maybe confused that they've had an occasional episode of incontinence. That's just situational related. But what we want to look at is, what type do we have? And that stress incontinence is that coughing, sneezing, some previous problem. And it's, again, this one's very much more seen in women than men, especially if she's had big babies and many babies, that You giggle, you cough, you sneeze, and it just kind of stresses it and comes out. There's nothing psychological about this. It's just a physiologic thing. Urge incontinence is when we usually in a healthy bladder, when you have about a cup of urine in there, you have the urge to go. What we're here is your sphincter muscle and bladder muscle are what helps us, but we're losing that ability. So we have that urge to go. So for no reason, we have inappropriate bladder contractions and we just gotta go. Gotta go, gotta go. Now, overflow is where it doesn't empty properly. You have weak muscles. This is really a big deal, this overflow, because if you remember about diabetes, is that we have macrovascular and microvascular changes and nerve damage with diabetes. And diabetes is the precursor to why someone has problems, and that is more with overflow. Functional, they just have some constant dribbling. We also have overactive bladder. You see that on TV, and we can give drugs to help. That's another nerve problem. So overactive, overflow are basically the same thing. They can have to go to the bathroom up to 7 times a day. So as you're planning care and working with your aides and what's happening, you want to be aware of this. Many people have a mix of more than one. So we're going to have to do a really big history. When did this start? How often has it been going on? Do you notice any odor? Is there any color? You want to just do that real good urinary assessment. You know, are you drinking more than normal? What's normal for you? There are actual urinary interview instruments available. We like people to do a bladder diary. How many times a night do you get up? How often a day do you go to the bathroom? How often do you feel that it leaks? And again, cognitive status, because if I don't have cognition, I may not be able to control it as we can. You want to do a real solid physical assessment. Hydration, rectal, making sure there's no masses, looking at that abdomen. We can do bladder scanning to see how much volume is left, doing a urinalysis to make sure that we don't have any infectious processes going on. And we always want to make sure the environment is right, okay? What is that environment for them? Because if you have, you know, some urge incontinence and water's running, you're going to want to have to go to the bathroom. So it really is patient-centered goals. We need to understand the patient's expectations. It's what do they, if they're okay with it, they're okay with it. But then we've got to worry about cleanliness and skincare, because the goals are usually multi-dimensional. And total continence is not necessarily required for patient satisfaction. It just might be that I can find the right product, that I'm comfortable enough to go out. Or I can remember my mom's case where my poor father was absorbent enough at night because I don't know what the heck went on. We pottied her every 2 hours while she was up, and we took her to the bathroom and encouraged her to go and let her sit there. But there was something about it nighttime, and that woman could flood a bed. And it was helping my dad find the right products that at least if she did wet, it was more contained, because they wash sheets every morning. We want to do that prompted boiling. Toileting schedules are important. We can do bladder retraining. There is actual pelvic muscle rehab. You should be doing those Kegel exercises, men and women. We have some body-mind connection, urge suppression techniques. Hydration management, making sure that a lot of liquid isn't given at night, but it's certainly given during the day. Bowel function, that bowel and bladder work closely together. They actually can do pelvic floor electrical stimulation. Pharmacological management is great to add in frail old people. But again, there are potential adverse reactions and now more costs. And where the biggest costs go are into those continence garments, toileting equipment. But it's those darn garments, and they are not covered by Medicare. Again, be sure that you're doing preventing skin breakdown, using moisture barriers. No rinse incontinent cleansers, they know, are better than soap and water because they've got a little lotion, they've got some cleaning agent in there. But what we really have to worry about is incontinent-associated dermatitis. That's where you get a lot of urine in the skin. Oh, and it's dark and it's damp, and it can cause pressure ulcers. So keeping these people clean and turned and not sitting up in a chair is so important. Again, we need rapid access to that bathroom, and that might mean bringing a commode into the home, and the commode is used in the at the nighttime, but then you have to remember who's available to empty it in the morning. We try to stay away from indwelling catheters. This is no longer how we manage urinary incontinence. There's a lot more regulations on it, and in the hospitals now, they need to come out. So that is why we need to be so aware that we got to get people up and moving and those catheters out. They used to be a great convenient, but actually they're causing more problems. It can be a disabling condition. It is a medical condition. It's a common condition, but it is not part of the aging process. And with cognition, we can at least improve their quality of life.